Hello and welcome to another episode of the DVD Graveyard. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at Galaxy of Terror, aka Mind Warp and Infinity of Terror, which actually, to me personally, I think is a little bit more fitting title to the movie, which we'll talk a little bit more about in just a little bit. But Galaxy of Terror just has such a great ring to it, and that's kind of what attracted me to this movie originally. Is the title is just so cheesy, and it's kind of like a callback to like early 50s kind of sci-fi horror films. To me personally, that's kind of what it put me in the mind of. But this movie came out in 1981, and it was directed by Bruce D. Clark, and it was written by Mark Siegler and Bruce D. Clark. Now, this is a Roger Corman production, and I mean, if you know anything about Roger Corman, you're going to get some really interesting concepts, some very gratuitous nudity and sex and creature sex and rape and everything else, because Roger Corman really liked to kind of shoehorn those things into his movies, or not his movies, but the movies he was producing. But he gave a lot, a really good start to a lot of, more or less unknown directors, or that directors that would have kind of gone unknown. He kind of gave a lot of them sort of their first shot, such as like Joe Dante with Piranha. That was another Corman production, probably one of the more well-known Corman productions. But this movie, I go a few years back with this movie. I can remember pretty much the first time that I saw this, and it kind of, I think it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, if not longer, around the year 2018, 2017, 2018, somewhere around in there, because I lived in my first duplex apartment. And I remember I worked at a grocery store. I will not say the name of it. And I worked there for a long time. Hated every second of it. But I worked there. And every now and then I would have to work overnights, which I really didn't mind because there was no customers. And, the managers weren't there. So it was kind of a good time to work, to be honest with you. And I would work from midnight to 8 a.m. And there was this guy that worked on the night crew. His name was Chris. For the life of me, I cannot remember his last name. I wish I could, because I'd like to get in contact with him, because he kind of moved without really telling anybody or anything. Like, he was just kind of gone one day. And I was like, damn, I really liked him. Chris moved, but before he moved, like I said, I had met Chris, and he was a really cool dude, and me and him kind of, one day, I think, when I was working overnight, I was wearing my my The Thing t-shirt, and he saw that, and he was like, oh, you like movies? You like horror movies? And I was like, hell yeah, dude. I was like, I love horror movies. And he was like, man, what are you into? And so it just kind of struck up this conversation, and me and him became like best friends, like instantly. And we just talked about movies that we liked and stuff like that. And he's the one who really turned me on to this movie, because he's like, do you like stuff like this? Like really cheesy sort of B movies and stuff? And I was like, yeah, dude, I love shit like that. Like, and he said, well, I'm going to let you borrow these. And it was this movie, Galaxy of Terror. He had just gotten it on Blu-ray. And then he let me borrow Humanoids from the Deep, which is another really great movie. I fucking love that movie, and I look forward to talking about it. But he let me borrow both of the Blu-rays for those. And I remember taking them home that morning. I got off at 8 o'clock in the morning. I went home and immediately watched those. I watched Humanoids from the Deep first, and that was the one I was kind of a little bit more interested in, and fell in love with it. Absolutely loved that movie to death. And then I put Galaxy of Terror on right after that, and I was like, holy shit, this movie's fantastic as well. Now, it was a little odd, and I didn't really understand what was going on, because it's a very strange movie, and there's a lot of stuff kind of going on with it. But I mean, you get a lot of big or who would be big actors in the horror industry later on, and some other people on the production, which I'll mention in just a minute. But, kind of to segue off of that, I'll talk about the cast just a little bit. So, this movie stars Taffy O'Connell, which plays Damia, I think is how you say her name. Edward Albert, who plays Cabrin, or however you say his name. Ray Walston, which he's been in quite a bit of stuff, plays Core. Zalman King, who plays Balon, which is kind of your lead guy. Like, I mean, everybody kind of gets, equal screen time in this movie. And then kind of the standout two people in the cast in this movie are going to be a young Robert Englund is in this movie, which is crazy. That really tripped me out to see him in this, out of the blue. And of course, Sid Haig is in this movie. And I think that's kind of one of the most famous sort of I guess big name people that would be in this movie later, is because you know when you talk about Sid Haig, you know this is one that I hear a lot of people kind of bring up when they talk about his early work. Now, of course, Sid Haig was in a lot of you know other stuff you know around this time, and his acting career goes way back. But this is one that always comes to mind. Does not have any line. I think he has one line in this movie. You know, I live and die by the crystals. You know, that's his like one line in this whole movie. And I think the reason he didn't speak any of the dialogue is because it was a lot of exposition based stuff, and I think he just felt that the dialogue was really silly. Sort of akin to like something like Christopher Lee did that. I know in some of the Hammer Dracula films, he refused to speak the dialogue, which is fine because his character comes off, you know, Sid Haig's character in this movie comes off a little bit more as kind of a tough badass kind of guy in this because he has no lines. He's just kind of this brooding dude kind of in the background. So I think that actually worked out for the best. You know, I think he told Roger Corman that he refused to speak the lines, and I'm glad he did, because again, it adds this sort of mystique to his character more or less. So of course there's a much larger cast in there. Those are just kind of some of the standout people that you'll notice in this movie. And like I said, there's some big names on the production. One, in fact, being James Cameron did a lot of the set design for this movie. Now, this was post-Alien, but pre-Aliens, you know, which of course was Cameron's, not his seminal work. You know, that wasn't his first film, but that's one that a lot of people remember, and that's probably one of my favorite James Cameron movies. But it's funny, you know, that little connection, because with that connection, you know, this movie really started off, I think, in concept, it started off as sort of a rip-off of Alien, because once Alien came out and that movie was so successful and just so fucking great. Like, I love the first Alien. I mean, it's, again, one of my favorite horror films of all time. The first Alien, you know, was very influential, so a lot of people were kind of ripping it off, you know, with these kind of cheesy sort of sci-fi B movies. They were kind of taken from the plot, and this is one of those films that did that. But what's funny about that is some of the plot, like some of the stuff that's going on in this movie, would later go on to inspire some of the plot elements of Aliens. So it's funny that a movie can, you know, start by ripping off a franchise and then later kind of influence that same franchise, because again, I think Cameron took a lot of the ideas that he had in this, you know, for the set design in this movie. You know, the kind of the concept of the sort of soldiers kind of on a rescue mission to this kind of unknown planet that, you know, and sort of this you know, just a lot of the ideas, I mean, are there, you know, for Aliens. This is kind of like a precursor to Aliens. And this movie, again, is not going to be for everybody. It's not going to be something that, you know, I think I say that about every movie I talk about on here, to be honest with you, you know, because, I mean, everybody has their own taste. But, you know, if you like really cheesy B sci-fi movies, like really goofy movies, this is definitely one you're going to want to check out. So I'm not going to get too deep into it. I do want to go over it just a little bit, but I'm going to get into the plot synopsis off the back of this DVD. Now, this is the Shout Factory DVD. I've had this for a while, like right after I gave that copy back to my buddy Chris. You know, and like I said, I never really saw him again after I gave him those back. He just kind of moved and disappeared. I had to buy my own copy of this, and I have several of these Roger Corman's cult classic DVDs. Like, I love these releases. You know, they're some of my favorites, you know, in the Shout Factory catalog. But I will read the back of this. The mind's innermost fears become reality for the crew members of the Quest when they land on the barren planet Morganthus, hoping to find the missing crew members of the starship Remus, only to discover something deadly waiting for them. Each member of the rescuing team must come face to face with their darkest fears or perish. The cast on board the Quest includes Edward Albert, The House Where Evil Dwells, Aaron Moran from Happy Days, Ray Walston from My Favorite Martian, Robert Englund, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Zalman King, Blue Sunshine, and Sid Haig from House of a Thousand Corpses. This film also had its share of new and emerging talent behind the camera, including James Cameron, of course we talked about, who did the production design, and Bill Paxton, who worked as a set decorator before later collaborating with Cameron in front of the camera as an actor. I forgot about that. So Bill Paxton did work on some of the set design in this movie as well. So that's interesting too. You know, so there's a lot of ties in this movie to larger films. You know, specifically Aliens, which is, again, I just think is kind of funny. So this movie basically is about they're not really soldiers in this movie like Aliens. They're sort of like a space crew, I guess, and they go on this rescue mission, basically to the planet Morganthus to find this ship Remus, which is another kind of funny alien tie-in. Whenever we go into Romulus, many years later. So that's funny too. Interesting little connection there. I don't know if that was an influence or not, but it's just something that I noticed. Anyway, they go there to basically, find this other ship, and whenever they get to this planet, things are not quite right. Things just kind of start going south, and they, the members of the crew start kind of getting killed off by these just random, crazy, interesting in just very strange ways. I'll touch more on that in just a little bit, but I really want to kind of talk about the set design of this movie, because first of all, the whole movie has this really, really interesting vibe to it. It has this really creepy, almost dreamlike vibe, and I've always loved this kind of idea of just going to this unknown planet, and there just being some kind of old civilization there that nobody knows anything about, with these old structures, like they find this old pyramid, that's on this planet, and they end up going inside of it, and just crazy shit starts happening. And again, the set design is fantastic. Everything looks really good, but in a really cheap way, in a very low budget, kind of goofy way. Like all the costumes, everything like that. But it feels believable enough. It is something that you can get behind it, and you can really kind of see, you can kind of suspend your disbelief in a way and kind of put yourself into this world. And it honestly does, like I said earlier, the title of the movie and the poster, that was something I forgot to mention too, is I love the poster art for this. The Galaxy of Terror, the iconic dragon looking thing coming down and trying to pick up the girl with the kind of sci-fi background going on. I love that poster, and this whole movie kind of screams that 50s sci-fi aesthetic, and the movie kind of has a little bit of that vibe to it, with just some of the sound effects that they use, the costume design, the sound of like the laser guns, the plot in and of itself. But that's the mindset that it put me in. That's what it made me think of, and I love that. And it just has this really corny and goofy vibe to it, but it's also kind of spooky and very atmospheric, and it's a movie that I love to watch. Like I watched it this morning, and I woke up at like 5 o'clock this morning, and for some reason I was just thinking about this movie, so I just decided to throw it on and watch it. It's one that it has been kind of, it kind of just pops into my head every once in a while, and I'm just like, I need to watch that. I haven't watched that in a while, and then I'll sit down and watch it, and I love it just a little bit more each time I watch it, to be completely honest with you. It's just one of those movies that, it really benefits from, me watching it, I guess, really early in the morning when I'm not quite awake, or really late at night whenever I'm about to fall asleep. It just has a really, really nice kind of cool vibe to it, and that's something I love about this movie. It's fantastic. Like I said earlier, we have a pretty big cast in this. Kind of the standout person that we know from this movie is Robert Englund. Now, he's not the main character in this movie. He is definitely a side character, but he does well. He's not an award-winning actor in this movie by any means, but he does fine, and the rest of the cast does fine. Nobody's just awful that I can remember off the top of my head. Everybody's doing a fine job with what they're working with. And again, they're not perfect. Nobody in this movie is perfect, and there are some scenes that are kind of laughable with the dialogue. But again, it sort of, again, leans into that sort of old school sci-fi aesthetic. So, it doesn't really bother me. It's not something that I'm like, oh my God, these actors are horrible, or that line delivery was like shit. And I'm not somebody who really gets hung up on stuff like that anyway, unless it's just fucking god awful. So that's, don't expect any Oscar-winning performances in this movie by any means, which I think is to be expected. But anyway, like I said, set design is fantastic, and is to tack onto that, to add on to that, the creature design in this movie is also fantastic. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So what the plot of this movie is, basically, is when they go, or I'm sorry, really kind of what's going on in this movie is it's not like a central monster or central creature in this movie. So basically, when they go into this pyramid, I think we find out kind of towards the end that this pyramid was a a gauntlet or something like that, if you want to call it, where this race of beings would go through it, and pretty much they would kind of face their fears. Like, it would manifest their greatest internal fears, I guess you could say. And that's really what goes on. Like, so all the creatures in this movie, or all the things that happen to the characters in this film, are basically their greatest fears manifest and kill them. So, for example, Sid Haig, his character has these weird, like, crystal throwing star type things. That's his thing, and at one point, the piece of it kind of breaks off and goes up into his skin, and he ends up, like, cutting off his own arm, and he is impaled by his own little throwing star. That was a really interesting scene, and actually really well done. The effects are pretty good in this movie, to be completely honest with you. Or there's, like, another character, I think it's Balon. He's attacked by, like, a legitimate alien creature, comes and kills him. Another guy is killed by, like, this alien crab spider looking thing, which is really interesting. And the kind of standout scene from this movie that I think everybody remembers, and I think this is one that, again, my buddy Chris told me about, that I was like, what the fuck? There's a scene where a character in this movie, there's, like, this worm, that this nasty monster worm thing that grows to enormous size and basically grabs her and covers her in slime, and then it proceeds to rape her in Roger Corman fashion. And when you see that, you're like, holy fuck, like, what the hell is going on? So that's kind of the one of the more memorable scenes, I hate to say, in this movie, but it looks great. All the monster effects in this movie do look really good. I don't really have any complaints in that department. They're really cheesy, but again, that's really it plays into the whole tone of the movie. Like, the whole movie is just cheesy and ridiculous. So it's a fun time. Now, when we get to the conclusion, basically, what happens is there's kind of one centralized character left. I can't remember who it is off the top of my head exactly. I was calling him, if it's the same guy I remember, he's the Tom Skerritt knockoff in this movie. But he basically, towards the end, he is confronted by all the creatures that have attacked everyone throughout the whole movie, including the dead crew themselves. He's attacked by all of them, and he faces all of his fears, and he basically confronts this person that we meet at the beginning of the movie called the Master, who is kind of like, I guess you could say he's the master of the universe, or whatever you want to call him, but he kind of confronts him, and apparently it was like I don't know if he was, like, putting them through this as, like, a trial run type thing, but he's kind of the one that organized the whole situation and got them to this planet in the first place, and he basically he kills the master, but since the master can't really die, I think he becomes, like, the master of the universe, and he gets the red kind of aura around his head, which is the sort of kind of thing that the master has. It's a very almost kind of convoluted plot. Like, they're building quite a bit of backstory in there, but a lot, it's not something like that you really kind of want to get invested in, or that you have a lot of questions about, or I didn't anyway. It's just one of those things where you're like, oh, okay, I get what you're doing there. But like I said, once it wraps up, it is kind of confusing. Like, I did have to watch it a couple times to really, and then read something about it to really kind of understand kind of what was going on. But that is more or less this movie in a nutshell. Galaxy of Terror. Like I said, this movie is not going to be for everybody, but if you are, in the mood for a cheesy, goofy, almost 50s style sci-fi horror film, absolutely check this out. Like, if you're a fan of Roger Corman type movies, definitely you're going to want to watch this. This is such an entertaining movie. It entertains the shit out of me. I love watching it anytime I get the chance. If you do want to watch this movie, I believe it is free on Tubi with a lot of these other films like I have in these Roger Corman Cult Classics collection that I have. I'd like to actually show those off one day. Maybe I will pretty soon. That were released by Shout Factory. Some of them are actually out of print now and kind of hard to get, but this one I think is still pretty widely available. Now, this movie does loosely have a sequel in a way. So, like, if you look it up, like if you look this movie up on Google, it will tell you that the sequel is Forbidden World. Now, I also do have Forbidden World. I have a copy of that, and that is also a good movie. I like watching that one. It has a sort of a similar, goofy, cheesy sci-fi horror vibe to it, and that one's a little bit sort of even more of a ripoff of Alien in ways, but it is definitely different enough. But I never really got the idea that it was a sequel. I saw it before I even knew that it was considered a sequel. But I could see like somebody saying that it takes place in the same universe. Mainly because, of course, in Roger Corman fashion, a lot of the sets from Galaxy of Terror have been reused for that movie. A lot of the costumes are reused for that movie. So I could see you kind of drawing that connection there, but narratively, I don't really see it being a sequel by any means. But if you want to call it a sequel, hell yeah, I mean, go for it. That is Forbidden World that I was talking about, which I'd like to review as well. AKA Mutant is the other title, which, again, that's a fun movie too. I'd like to talk about at some point. And then, of course, there was even a remake of Mutant, or you could, I guess, call it also a sequel, called Dead Space. Not to be confused with the video game, but the film is called Dead Space, and that's a fun movie too. I think Forbidden World is actually a little bit better if I remember correctly, unless I'm getting them confused. But they do kind of follow a similar plot. Bryan Cranston actually shows up in one of those movies. I just can't remember which one it is. I have Dead Space. It's in like a double pack with The Terror Within, which is a fantastic movie. That's another kind of almost blatant alien ripoff, which I'd like to talk about at some point too. But all these movies in this Roger Corman sort of catalog that he produced and released, they all have a sort of loose connection, but again, mainly it's due to the reusing of sets, or just the reusing of assets, period. Like, I mean, they just reuse a lot of stuff. But they're all fun movies, and again, they're not like award-winning films, but if you just are in the mood to watch something really goofy and silly and cheesy but fun, definitely you can throw any one of these on. They're all very short, and I think all of the ones I just mentioned are on Tubi. I'd like to review all of them because really that's kind of my bread and butter, are like these cheesy B movies. Like, I don't know why I love them so much, but I mean, I love a good B movie. It's something that I've always enjoyed, and there's a certain charm to them and a certain vibe that all of them have that just really does it for me. Anyway, that is it for me. I'm glad I got to talk about this movie. It's one I've been wanting to talk about for quite some time. Look forward to another review. I've got some other stuff coming up pretty soon. I don't know what yet exactly. I have a few things kind of planned, but I haven't really decided on anything for sure yet. But I hope everyone enjoyed this review. I hope everyone gets the chance to check this out. I think everybody should see it at least once. Like I said, if you're a fan of stuff like this. So as always, stay tuned for the next episode. Have a great night, and goodbye.